This is quantifiably the best time to be a scientist. So today there's more data than yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. So it's exponential and even super exponential, the excitement.
I'm here with Chris Mason, expert in space and also in the future. So, my meditation from before is playing.
You really were meditating. Huh? Yeah, nice.
So you are an expert in the future. What does that mean? And what does that mean you are expert in the future?
Well, some people say that I'm a futurist, but what it means you look into the future and plan accordingly. I say I'm just an empiricist, meaning I don't even think I'm from the future or dreaming of the future. I'm just taking a reasonable view of where we are and where we're likely going, and then making a projection. So it's much like taking a flashlight.
So you're seeing more history, you're seeing more the present to make projections?
Yes.
What exactly?
Yeah, more like looking at the state of technology today. So what we can do in genetics, in space flight, diagnostics, what we do at our hospital. I'm here at the hospital. The way we can treat patients, the way we can see the body change in disease or in health. Take all that technology and we can see very clearly that in the future, it gets better, faster, easier, and even gets more customized. So maybe you could survive on planets that the human body was never built to survive on.
Okay, so I know that you did, you monitored some people that they went to space.
Yes.
What did we learn about the people that went to space, about their body? Can we live in space for not millions of years, for hundreds of years, like without any impact on our body or something?
So we have worked on a number of different missions with NASA and SpaceX and Axiom, these other government providers like NASA, ESA, the European Space Agency, JAXA. Every large country seems to have its own space program. Also,
but the two biggest are NASA and SpaceX, right?
Yeah, kind of the two biggest companies doing the most research, flying the most people into space right now. And we've worked with them closely to see what happens to the body when you go in space, even for just a few days, orbiting around the planet. Or in the case of Scott Kelly, who I was just talking to earlier today, if you go for 1 year and you're in space, what happens to the body?
This is the astronaut that you took samples from his body.
Yes, the twin. So Scott Kelly.
Did he got older faster? Did he got what happened to his body?
So his muscles atrophied, meaning they lost some density. His bones lost density. We could even see calcium come out in his urine as the bones were sort of basically being almost dissolved and being deleted in a sense. But then it's also being rebuilt. So we could see the enzymes for losing and gaining bone density at the same time, fighting with each other, trying to maintain the density of his bones. And, but eventually over time, you do lose some of the density of your bones. And it's kind of like osteoporosis, or if you get old, it has a very similar feeling where you've lost that density of your bones. So some things were older, but on the other hand, he also got longer telomeres. And
what does that mean?
So genetically, these are, think of like on your shoes, you have your shoelaces, and at the very end, you have these caps that keep the shoelace in place. In your DNA, you have the same thing. You have telomeres, and you have a cap at the end. That's those telomeres that keeps the DNA intact. And that we see actually those got longer in space. And normally, as you age, they get shorter. So it was surprising. He looked a little bit genetically younger in space, actually.
Okay, so but let's say one kid is born in space. Do you think his body will be different, like a bit fatter, a bit bigger head? Like, what do you think about this?
Good question. So probably he'll look different. So there's never been sex in space with humans, as far as we know. Yeah,
as far as we know,
officially. But if you did have sex and had a baby, it's not clear the baby would be okay, and if it did get born, it would probably look different. It would have maybe.
Why are we not testing this? Is this?
Well, it's considered too dangerous right now because if the baby dies or if the fetus is aborted, then it means you basically ran an experiment that could kill a child. So it's too. But it might be okay. We just don't know. But from what we've seen from mouse experiments, where they've taken mouse embryos that have flown up and then tried to bring them back. They have been disrupted. It probably would be a diet like
they died.
Died. Most of them died that have been tried to actually be the embryos that were from space and then brought back and then planted. So they either died or they had defects. So we know it's risky, but for humans, we've evolved with gravity for millions and millions of years, and so we've never had a baby without gravity.
But we're adjustable species, right? So this is, I think, one of our best advantages, to be so adjustable. So you think we're capable to actually adjust that fast to the new environment, and as ourselves go and do interstellar travel? How my English is a bit weird.
That's good. No, we start to go between stars. That's exactly what we can do. So I 100% agree. One of the most striking features of humans is that we can be, as far as we know, we're the only species that are aware of extinction, that understand that life can end, that even all of life can end.
So no animals know that they're going to die,
or know that the whole species will die. The extinction is
only
we understand that scale of death, right? Most animals avoid their death, avoid negative stimuli. Even algae or a small amoeba can avoid death, but we're the only species that can avoid species-wide death or extinction. But to your point, we can modify the environment, we can modify ourselves. We can change effectively what we are biologically, more so than any other species.
So, I was talking with Avi Loeb. I don't know if you know him.
The Umanuma spacecraft or potential spacecraft.
And he really made me excited about space. And my question is, like, what do you think is will happen in the future? Like, are we, and like, let's say I give you now $1 trillion. How do you spend it to improve, and you give it to research, you make more like companies like SpaceX? What do you do with it?
Great. Easily, I could spend it tomorrow. I could spend the whole thing. We go to this one bar in Manhattan, and you can do it. Spend it all one night. The
bar.
No, you could, but scientifically, if you didn't want to go to the bar, you could actually spend a lot on the engineering side, the biological engineering. So tools that let us go in and change DNA or modify it, or add DNA from one species and put it into human cells, which we're doing in our lab right here.
What do you mean from one species? Like from
tardigrades,
a horse, for example?
Horse. It could be from a jellyfish. It could be from a tardigrade, those bears that can survive in space. And so we learn from every species that has DNA, and you can use it, much like you would a hammer or a screwdriver or a tool in a shed. We would expand the shed of tools for genetics and manipulate cells.
And we're going to make cooler humans eventually.
Cooler humans. Well, and we would do clinical trials. So clinical trials are expensive. When you try a new drug, try new therapy, we do it at the hospital all the time. It's millions and millions of dollars to track the safety, the efficacy, make sure the patients are okay. We have to do the same thing for humans when we think about these really unique therapies that could let you survive on Mars or survive even on other planets. But it will take multiple generations to make sure that we are doing it correctly.
Wait, I need to understand better what you mean by genetically doing jellyfish to a human. Like when he's younger, when he's older, when he's an embryo, like how do all these tests happen? So give me more context on that.
So if you're an embryo, it's easier because there are fewer cells to modify. If you only have thousands of cells, you can modify them. If you have trillions of cells, like you're an adult, it's just much harder to reach all of those cells. So it is easier to do things as an embryo. However, that means if you do it, you have to make sure it is almost perfect, right? So the He Jiankui was a Chinese researcher who CRISPR'd human embryos in 2018, made this big announcement and said, aha, I have genetically modified human embryos. And what he did was he deleted something called a receptor that lets HIV, the virus for AIDS, get into T cells. So he said, what I'll do is I'll delete this and make it so they're immune to HIV or to most strains of HIV. So he said, look, their parents had AIDS, but now I've made it so their children can never get AIDS effectively. And he said, this is a good thing. So he tried to, announce to the world that he'd done a good thing. But the problem was a lot of the embryos died. It didn't work. And the children that were born, these several children with this new deletion, this new genetic therapy, we don't know how healthy they are or what happened to them, or it's very likely that they had not just one genetic modification, but the way CRISPR works, it could make several dozen.
And now we're coming to a lot of philosophical questions, like how okay is it to modify
an embryo? Because they can never say yes. They're obviously too small to say yes. So can you ethically modify someone who cannot consent for the research? And that's where the clear
Wow.
the medical.
I love this.
Yes,
You're the
yeah.
best. This
Yes,
will be exciting.
This is the big question, right? So the bar has to be very high. You have to say, we will take away your ability to choose, but we're doing it because it will help. It'll be necessary for you to survive. And I think there's only two places where that's possible, in my opinion. And I wrote about this in my book a bit. Is if you think about two parents who want to have a child, and both of them, let's say, have a genetic mutation that makes it impossible for them to have a healthy child. Say they both have Huntington's disease that's early onset, and they have it, and both copies of their DNA. You have two copies of every gene, and there's no way for them to have a healthy child that won't suffer from the disease. There, you could say we need to modify the embryo to if we want our own cells to have a healthy child. It's the only way we can have a healthy child. Now, you could say ethically, you could adopt a child, you could have a surrogate egg, or you could have a donor. But if they say we want to have the genetic right to reproduce with our own DNA, and we have the genetic tools to correct a defect, I think that's in their
because we're not going to have child.
Right, yeah.
So that's the only.
It's the only way they can have a child. Like, let's say it's an embryonic lethal is a term, where if they each have two parents have mutations that it kills the baby within the first year. Could, like, Tay-Sachs disease is one where.
So you have a lot of limited kind of in this space. It's not an abundance of samples and research and all this stuff. You can't.
It's very, very rare, and to do this research is expensive. So if I had $1 trillion, I would do a lot more. But so that's one example of parents who want to have a healthy child, and there's no other way to have a healthy child. You'd have to make sure, though, that the genetic editing you do doesn't create other problems, which is why I think it has to be a long-term and even intergenerational clinical tracking and trial. But the second case is where, let's say you send a human being to another planet, and you say, okay, we're going to put you in this very dangerous place what your body is not built for. And
Mars.
Mars, for example. And you get there, but if we have technology that could modify DNA to keep them safe, and it's a reasonable and efficacious and safe technology, but we don't use that, then I think that's actually more unethical, because we have a capacity and a technology to keep someone safe, assuming it works.
Okay.
And if you send someone to a dangerous place, but you don't.
So we are going. Do we know now stuff that, like, for example, mixing a jellyfish gene or with a human? Do we know that this will work and what effect will have?
We do. We have certain examples where you can actually
take
there's one gene from an organism called the tardigrade. I don't know if you ever heard of the tardigrade. It looks like called a water bear. This is the guy. Oh, yeah. So it looks kind of like this, actually, for our lab Christmas party. One of my students made basically a stable diffusion. This is you can type into the AI art algorithms and say, I want to make a tardigrade with an astronaut riding it on Mars. So he typed this in, made an image, and then got it printed out for a Christmas present. So exactly that's it. Because in our lab, we have tardigrade genes inside human cells that give them extra resistance to radiation. So we've actually proven out that you can modify humans with a gene from a different species, bring it in, and get the powers of that.
And that what will do exactly to a human? It will make him live longer. It will make him adjust easier. What exactly will do to a human?
Help him actually avoid the damage, the DNA damage. So all that radiation on Mars, which would be 10 times the amount of radiation here, some places more. He could absorb all that radiation and probably be just fine. So because we can actually decrease the damage by about 80 or 85%.
So you are talking about humans, improving humans' capabilities. Yeah. But what about some different things that you can do in space, and what we should do to explore the...
One of them is the radiation. So you want to figure out ways to protect against radiation.
But
which is much higher
maybe robots don't need to protect from radiation.
Correct. This is a debate I've had with lots of people: is could we just send robots? It's obviously safer. If they die, you can just send a new one. But basically the processing capacity and I think creativity of a robot is never going to be as good as a person. At least not for, say, a few hundred years. Maybe someday that could be equal, but we're not there yet. And I think also the goal is not just to send robots there for discovery, but eventually we want humans to be there permanently. We want humans to have a permanent presence on the moon, to be permanently on Mars, mostly because we have to, because eventually the sun will eat up the inner planets and engulf the Earth. If we're still here, we'll all be dead anyway. So we have to begin the process.
Can you please explain? So in 1 billion years, the sun will...
About 4.7 billion years,
the sun will stop.
It will engulf the inner planets. It becomes a red giant. However, in about 1 billion years, the sun will get hotter. It will get so hot that the oceans will start to boil. And so we probably can't survive past that much, I'd say. So we really have about 1 billion years of a clock left on this planet.
And if everything goes
right, without asteroids or climate, overheating the environment. Yeah, assuming nothing else, a pandemic, for example. Right, assuming none of that happens, right, which has already happened.
Okay, explain me though, so we go to a planet, and then we go to another planet, and then we go to another planet, and then we make bases there, and then we
keep going.
What do you think about it?
So eventually we'd want to be across most of the galaxy would be the goal, and that would take probably several tens of billions of years to make that possible. But,
why?
But to survive. The very first goal is to survive, so because the sun will end. The second is to preserve life.
So we're going to find other solar systems.
Yes, they have different planets. Yeah, and actually, right now there's over several thousand exoplanets found, and about 400 of them could be in the habitable zone, meaning they might have liquid water. Humans could maybe survive, maybe today. You just have to get there, which is pretty fabulous. So I think, but once you get there, you have to send more people, basically settle the planet, make sure you can survive. And for each of these planets, you may have to slightly modify the human biology to enable survival in the first place. Yeah. This is 20 years ago. It was pure science fiction. This was not even really that possible. We had just barely had the first.
What made it optimistic and tangible now?
The technology has dramatically changed. There was, 20...
What, the CRISPR thing?
CRISPR is a big factor. The human genome, the fact that we know what the book of life looks like. Before, if you wanted to modify DNA, you barely knew what the sequence was. It'd be like saying, I want to buy a book, but half the chapters were missing. So you couldn't edit the book. You couldn't even read the book, right? So I think what's extraordinary is we now have not just the human genome, but many, many other creatures' genomes, the DNA, their the letters of their life.
So we have the book now. So now we can edit the book and make. So it's important to have the book.
Yeah, and we didn't even have the book until 2001 or 2003. We had the first draft, but it was still missing pieces. It was not complete. But now we have a complete book of life for humans, but also for many other species. Like you think of chimpanzees or tardigrades, for example, fruit flies, bacteria. It's very easy today to take an organism, get all the DNA, and make a complete map of all of its genetic code, and then scan that code for things that you could maybe use, that you could take out and say, I would like to put this from one species into another to improve its ability to survive in water, or to make vitamin C, or to survive radiation. Now, you have to do it carefully, because as soon as you take something from one organism, put it in another, you could disrupt something. You could make it worse. You could make it so it dies faster. But you could also make it better, so it lives longer and maybe even lives in a new place. The same thing is true with, say, moving a tree from one part of the country to another. It could be an invasive species, or it could be a species that supports the ecosystem.
Was you always interested in this stuff?
Yeah, ever since I learned about the fact that the sun would engulf the earth at some point.
So sweet.
It seems so. It's just a simple logic. Like, if life is valuable, does life have any value, or humans for that matter? Which I think yes. So if life is valuable and has any merit in the universe, and it's at least we know it's unique. It's only on this planet so far we've ever found it. Life is at least rare and to some degree precious. But I also think life, and particularly human life, the ability to understand extinction and this awareness of the frailty of life, is itself extra unique in the universe, where it's unique on this planet. So life has value, I think intrinsic value, but also a species awareness value, and even the fact that it resists entropy in the universe. Everything else just decays away, but life is constantly reorganizing matter.
What do you mean about that?
Well, like if you put a drop of basically ink into water, it continues to expand. Entropy is always expanding. Or if something dies, it slowly decays, becomes into the earth. But when you're alive, you're still organizing your cells. Your face looks today mostly the same as it did yesterday, and your cells are mostly maintained. So life is continually changing and modifying states to keep itself alive. but rocks don't do this, of course, and oceans don't do this. But life is unique.
So you think we have something really special here?
Yeah, life is special. And so if life is special, which I think it is, and if the sun will engulf the earth in, several billion years, or boil the oceans in 1 billion years, if those two things are together, then that means by logic, we cannot stay on this planet forever. So ever since I was a kid, I put those two facts together and I thought, well, I want to understand biology so we could figure out how to preserve it. And I always was curious about space and being an astronaut, so those two things came together quite naturally.
How old you took that decision? Around
about 8th grade. I was maybe
15?
Or like 11, or at that point 11 or 12. It was so relatively young. 12 years old, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since.
That's a cool kid to say. Oh, biology is important. Space is important.
I think it is. It's the coolest thing there is, the fact that there's this genetic code. I mean, just think, you start out as only one cell when you're an embryo, and all the instructions to make everything in your body, your heart muscles, your brain, your neurons, your thoughts, your ideas that came from a lot of it, the instructions to make your whole body, it's all there in that one cell. So when I learned about that, that's the most fascinating thing of life, is that it's a machine that encodes its own mechanisms of production and regulation and expansion. And it's just one machine that's one little cell, but it's all there.
So as your life evolved from 12 years old to now, do you see a lot more investment, a lot more excitement on this space? And it snowballs, it's stale. How do you think about this?
Snowball, it's an avalanche, explosion. This is quantifiably the best time to be a scientist. So today there's more data, and genetic data, space data, molecular data, than yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. So literally every single day is the best day to be a scientist, because you can have access to more data, more tools, more technologies. So by far, it's exponential and even super exponential, the excitement.
So you see this happening very soon. All this stuff that you're describing, like in the next 100 years, you think we are going to have base on Mars and maybe different stars because of this exponential growth, or you don't think we're talking about 500 years from now?
No, I have a plan for 500 years, but I think in the next, really the next 20 years, we will have a permanent presence on the moon.
That's important, you think?
Yes, that's the first step towards getting towards Mars and getting to other planets. It's very close. If something goes really catastrophically wrong, you can be home in 5 days. If something goes wrong on Mars, it'll take you 6 to 9 months to get back. So it makes it easier as a testing bed.
So it's like, we're going to test our things, see how the spaceships are good here, and how do we survive, and what's the effect in a small scale, and then we make the big investment to
go to Mars. And also Mars, you'll have to send a lot of supplies, a lot of people. They'll have to go, and for some of them it'll be a one-way trip. They'll go maybe when they're 70, 75 and finish out the last 10 or 20 years of their life to help build a new society on Mars, which I already have a lot of people who have volunteered who are ready to go, but it's still a ways off. I think but China wants to have boots on the red planet by 2033. NASA has said by
2023.
2033.
33. So boots on the planet, what do you mean?
That's in 10 years. Like
boots, it means like someone land.
Like a foot on the ground. They probably won't stay, but land, explore for a few days, and then come back. Now that's ambitious, so we'll see. Elon Musk.
Also, Elon Musk is that. It's kind of funny. I remember 10 years ago. In 5 years, 5
years. It's always 10 years away, is what everyone jokes. But NASA has said 2037 is what they're thinking. But it's soon. I think.
So it happened again like the 1960 when it was a kind of a competition. Who is going to? And do you think this is healthy thing that is happening, or do you think like maybe this is?
Mostly healthy. I think it is, right now it is sharp competition between NASA and China, but there's also private space agencies that now are flying rockets, missions. SpaceX, obviously one of them, but Sierra Space, Axiom, other groups are building space stations.
You see the private sector stronger and you are more optimistic about the private sector or about
in terms of speed, I think the private sector is moving much faster. On some level, because they can, if someone says, I want to fly to Mars or I want to fly to the moon, how much does it cost? As long as you can pay the ticket, they'll fly you, right? So whereas with NASA, you could never just buy a spacecraft. You had to. It was very complicated. They only had so much space. There was a long training period. Whereas, for some of these other private missions, anybody can go as long as you have the funding. You can go to space.
Can you please explain me how these companies are going to be making money? So are they losing money, so much money, all this that? Because who is paying you to go to space?
The company, because a lot of it's $50 or $60 million per seat. So it's expensive to buy a seat, and people are buying them. So if you
actually people are buying,
people buy them up. So people are buying it, and governments are buying it. For example, NASA, when the space shuttle program was grounded for a while, so we had to use the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. That was about $60 to $65 million for each seat just to fly. So we would write a check to Russia, and they would fly the astronauts. So you can make money on the seats, but you can also make money on the experiments, the satellites, especially that go in space. Satellite companies, everything from telecommunications to weather to work in atmospheric science.
So you find a way to make money.
Yeah. Well, and Starlink is the other way. SpaceX has satellites now that can give internet almost anywhere in the world, like Ukraine, for example, and in the Western United States, where it's much more mountains and it's open areas where there's no big cable company or internet line. But you can just look to the sky and get your internet.
So he found a way to make a business model that works, so he can fund the other stuff.
Yeah. I think it works very well. I mean, they've had billions and billions of dollars of revenue coming in, so they're doing okay, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about. Do you think there is life on planets that we don't know?
I think on average. Probably. I think it'll probably be bacterial life exists on some other planet somewhere. The reason I think this is because we know on asteroids, you can have bacteria that can survive re-entry of an asteroid if you do modeling.
Explain.
And so if you put a bit of bacteria and you cover it with a lot of rock and you heat it to the temperature that would represent...
You put it in the middle, you put it in the side.
In the middle, and then see if it's... Even if the outside gets very, very hot, in the very center of an asteroid, if it's like a meteor coming through the sky... as long as it can make it and land on the surface, if it's a thick enough asteroid, the bacteria could survive and then start growing. So it's possible.
So you think this is the way that we grew?
Possibly. What's called panspermia is that there's, life can be seeded to other planets.
Wow.
It is. It is a bit of a male view because it's panspermia, not like panoocytes. It's not eggs. It's sperm. Panspermia is what's being spread. So it has a kind of a male sperm view, but it is still this idea of life, being, ejected from asteroids or maybe, as planets collide, that matter carrying some bits of life could move and then settle and start to grow. But I think there's, if you have the right conditions on the right planet with energy and light and heat, life, I think, will probably form many times in the universe. But you have to remember the universe is not that old. It's only about 13 billion years old, and it took several billion years just to cool. So for a long time, you couldn't have life because the universe was so hot. It was like basically a giant bang, big bang, big singularity. It took billions and billions of years for
how many billions of years?
About 3 or several billion years before it was just cool enough for
matter to even be hospitable to a bacteria.
Yeah, well, not even bacteria. Just be hospitable to hydrogen to become helium, for stars to form. And then stars had to form, and supernova had to explode to spread heavier elements out into the universe.
Now you're talking a bit complicated stuff.
Yeah, sure. You didn't even have atoms for a while because it was so hot. Right? Then you had to get hydrogen, then helium, then carbon, then iron.
So all this stuff is like a step that brings the other one, and then the conditions become, because of the previous step, some atoms develop. It's easier to do the next step. Okay.
And then they keep building on each other. But all that building took billions and billions of years. So, and the Earth is about, 4.7 billion years, maybe 5 billion years old. And it had to also cool. It was very hot at first, so nothing could really grow, or it was just too hot. So life, if you think about it, has only had maybe a few billion years to even have a chance to form in the history of the universe. But the universe will probably be hundreds of trillions of years old. At some point, it keeps growing, right? The universe should be here for a long time. And if we're I think what we are is the first life forms maybe to get here, maybe the second.
The first life form to get here. What do you mean?
The first life forms to form, and then to be made multicellular, and then to become conscious, and then to become aware. All that takes time. But I think it's possible. We're just the first ones. But I think we will not be the last ones, either by our own design, if we start sending probes and people to other planets, or that it would just happen again by chance with a warm planet.
You think it's very unlikely to happen what happened to this planet and to become humans? You think it's very, very unlikely
to be human again somewhere? To be
for this that we are this Earth with all these humans? You think this is like very unlikely scenario to happen generally?
I think for now, but I think there'll be at least one more like it in the next, let's say, billion years.
In our own Milky Way?
Just in our galaxy. And I think since there's billions of galaxies, that means there'll probably be billions of chances for life to form again that might be kind of like us. It probably won't look like us because it'll be a different light, different gravity, different nutrients, different environment. But I think life has just gotten started and will probably form many, many more times as the universe keeps going.
So
I hope so. At least.
And do you are you aware by the guy Donald Hoffman? Do you know about him?
By name, yeah, but not
yes,
closely.
he's presenting a theory that you seem like a physicalist guy, that you believe in the real world. So this guy is presenting that we are living in a simulation, but like this is all like a VR headset, and when we take it off, we're going to see the reality. So if you might be searching on the wrong place.
It might be all a simulation or a model of some kind.
And we might, if we take and see the reality as it is, we might get easier to all the other planets. Or we might, going to other planets is the wrong question because it's a different thing. What do you think about this?
It's interesting. There's also a movie that describes this, like Inception was a movie that we talked about people who could take basically a small drug and live so that 1 hour when they were sleeping was the equivalent of 10 minutes in this time. But when you're in this different space, you get more time. So you basically have more time to do more things because your brain works faster. But you have to be asleep. So you have to be laying down and you're sleeping and you can't do anything else in this world, but you can do a lot in other worlds. So I think eventually, though, you do need to have something that sustains this world, because if this world is where you're alive and there's a simulation that you have to put on, say, goggles, at some point this body would require nutrients or you have to be sustenance to survive at all. So even if it's true, at some point you have to always come back to, well, what is the entity that's experiencing? What is the body that is observing? And if that dies, then the observation dies. So at some point, even if it's true, you have to at some point.
So you are saying it's necessary for us to invest in this world, because if we want to discover the other world, we need to maintain these humans.
You have to.
So,
or for example,
so you are open to this, but you're saying that it's important for us to be alive, for us to discover all this.
Necessary. And it's not even a question. It's, for example, let's say everyone on Earth was wearing these goggles and it's a big simulation and it's a utopia and everyone has all the money they want and the food and sex and everything's wonderful, but they're all in the goggles, but they're all on Earth. But then if we're still here after 1 billion years, then the oceans will start to boil and then everyone will be dead. So you have to at some point take off the goggles and say, okay, let's keep doing this, but let's do it on another planet. You'd have to move and then, okay, put the goggles back on. So at some point, the physical body that enables the experience has to be taken care of, which means we have to eventually go to Mars and elsewhere.
Okay, your answer satisfied me.
I think good. But I think that technology is amazing because it's another thing that's different today versus 20 years ago. Like we can have a normal conversation about VR, AR, and headsets, and most people who are watching have probably tried something or at least can imagine it. But 20, 25 years ago, it was very early days. It was just like, it was kind of seemed weird and it didn't work that well. The graphics were not that good. But I think it's very important for thinking about if you're in space and you're in a small spacecraft and you say you're going to be in the spacecraft for 6 months, I think one of the only ways you'll really be able to feel like some sense of space is with these VR, AR technologies where you can put it on and live several months almost on a different planet while you're on your way to a real different planet, basically. So I'm very excited by the technology because I think you'll need it. Otherwise, if you're just in a
going
little
to go
tube,
crazy.
you go crazy, you go bored. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
right. So you like the technology because it will help the space
yes,
travel.
it will. Yeah. Very
Yes,
much
because if you are in the same, I'm going to be buried alive for 10 days in the next month.
Yeah.
So it would help if I have goggles.
It might not even be that bad. You could watch your favorite TV show 3 days in a row or something. Yeah.
So I'm curious because everyone thinks that it's fun to be a scientist and to go to podcast, but what is hard about your life?
Good question. So it is fun to be a scientist. It is I was just telling my lab today, it's like the best job I think possible. So, but there are experiments fail. So sometimes you'll set up an experiment and it fails, or you draw blood from a sample. We had some blood in the freezer that coagulated because one of the tubes was old. So we have to draw blood again. Or problems occur in lab, like in any job. Or if you're at a job and you have paper in your printer and you run out of paper, you got to get more paper. And then if you don't have it in your house, you got to go to the store. The same thing happens in the lab. We have supplies, tubes, tips, chemicals, reagents, and you run through them. And so you have to, and sometimes they don't work. That's a problem. Or data can be, essentially more complicated. So maybe there's more noise, or you build a model of what's happening inside of a cell, but the model isn't that correct. So you have to try a different model. You have to keep trying models, much like if you go to a store and you try on different hats to figure out what fits. Sometimes we have to look at the data that way and say, well, I want to try and explain why did someone get sick, or why did someone have a negative reaction to spaceflight. And so you have all this data and you're trying to figure out, you build mathematical models that try to look at the data to say what fits best, based on the shape of the data and the organism that you got the data from and the mission. But the data can be very messy. So sometimes you have to clean the data, or you have to get new data. And sometimes you even have to do an experiment or a mission, and you have to throw away the data, because if the data is crappy data and it's noisy and and it makes no sense, or the controls failed, you'll have to throw it away. It's basically like if you get a big meal and you go to the grocery store, you get a big watermelon or a big pizza, but if you get home and it's all mangled, or it has spoiled meat, and you have to throw the whole thing away. It's very sad, but if it's bad data, you can't keep it because it will make your life harder. So experiments fail, data can be bad. It's also people. Sometimes people have good days and bad days. Sometimes people love each other in labs. Sometimes people can hate each other in labs. So it's also human. It's a human business. So you can have human exchanges and love and hate and jealousy and anxiety and hope and fear. It's all present in any laboratory. So you have to manage all the people as well as part of it, I'd say.
So it's more about dealing with failure.
Yeah. If anything, expecting failure, like knowing that is. That anytime an experiment fails, you want to, and I say this to my people in my lab all the time, is failure is okay. It's even celebratory. Like if you can know why something failed, you can then learn from it and then hopefully never do that again. It's a simple thing. Like let's say you're doing an experiment, you're adding, 3 drops of this chemical and 5 and then 10. But if you forgot to add this one chemical, the experiment fails. You're like, aha, that's not an optional piece of chemistry. I need that chemistry. Or sometimes you can add something and the experiment goes a completely different way, or the reaction goes 10 times faster. So that's unlikely, but sometimes you can accidentally discover something that leads to a new discovery that's exciting, where it was a mistake, but it led to a new discovery, which can happen. Now, that's usually not that common. Usually just a mistake leads to loss of money and time and confidence, but you have to expect failure and even squeeze all the lessons from every failure and distill it down into, okay, this is everything we've learned. Let's make sure that never happens again, or to use this information to improve the experiment, to improve the protocol. For example, we're working on a protocol now to draw blood from in space, grab the molecules, the DNA, and then sequence it in space, and then do an immune profile and look at the genetics of a person in space. But there is currently no way to easily draw blood, purify the blood, actually prepare it, and then sequence it. Because normally you do it on a lab environment. You have a bench, you have centrifuges, you have chemistry.
So you can't do it in space, you're saying?
We now have a protocol that works, but it took us 6 months of trying different extraction buffers,
just to get the right conditions.
Just the right conditions. So it took trial and error.
But you knew that's the right problem of to solve.
And then you have to keep trying.
You spend a lot of time to find a way to solve that problem.
And failure is not only okay. Failure is the only way you're going to get there. You have to fail to know what works and what doesn't work. And so it is. But it makes it hard. It means that you wake up every day and like, I will probably have some things fail today, is the default state of most scientists. Yes. But
you need to put it in your reality that this is actually going to fail. Yeah. So I was at SpaceX and I understood some stuff about that place, and it's like, sometimes they throw away a rocket that costed $100 million just because they figure something new.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. Yeah. But you have no choice because, okay, well, we learned and that was expensive, but now we will do it the better way. Yeah. So it is this.
And pain is a good teacher.
It is. Absolutely. So that's the hard thing, I think, but it's also the necessary thing.
So, and you spoke about managing people. So I guess that's a big part of your job. What ways? Because I was talking with the people in your lab. It was very good that you were late to come because I had the opportunity to speak with them. So they said that it's your coordination and like you one of the good things that you have is like your ability to make people excited about the project that they're working on. So how do you do that?
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Good that they got you here. Well, it is. Some of it has to be a native excitement. Like I was saying, I'm excited because every day is the best day to be a scientist. So I remind them of that. And I think it is explaining the value of the research. So this technology could help us diagnose cancer or diagnose a virus better. We could learn about what's causing disease and then maybe fix it. So on the cancer research and the
that's
disease,
very Elon Musk is saying as well. When you teach people, you need to explain them why that thing is important that they are doing. Because if you and I found that to be very true as well. I continue to. I'm sorry for
absolutely,
this,
that's great.
But I wanted to throw that.
We have to start with the why is the phrase, like because if you're presenting your work or even if you're talking to someone at the bar or you're just meeting someone and they say, "What do you do?" and you have the answer. What it could be a scientist, it could be a journalist, it could be it could be an athlete, it could be anything, writer. And it's like, okay, then the next question should be, well, why or what gets you excited about it? And so the same thing's true with any project. You say, well, this is why I'm doing it, because we have a faster cure or a new molecule, or in the case of space, we can now actually do work in space that we couldn't do before. So I really try to impress upon everyone why it's important and specifically why it's important for this specific disease or this mission, or this has never been done before, so now we can do something that's entirely new to humanity. But I do often say that's a 500-year plan for the lab, and this is all part of the goal to get humans to other planets, and that every project...
So you set the realistic expectations that this is not going to make you get a Nobel Prize tomorrow.
It might. I mean, what's interesting about the Nobel Prize is you never know, because a lot of times many people who've gotten Nobel Prizes just started on something that was curious and strange, and then they studied it for sometimes, usually decades. But it often started with a peculiar idea, like phage therapy is in one example, where it was weird viruses that only infect bacteria. And why is that? So then 30 years later, you know about which kinds of phages, how they work, their function, and how they could be used therapeutically. I think, or Jennifer Doudna is a great example, and Carpentier is for CRISPR. They won the Nobel Prize for CRISPR.
I read that book.
It really started the Code Breakers, you probably read the book.
The guy that wrote the Steve Jobs biography as well.
Their work, it came from some work even in the mid 90s where people saw strange sequences within bacteria that look like viruses. But it took time before we could put those sequences in context. But most of it from Doudna and Carpentier was really just curiosity. Like, oh, that seems strange. Like, I wonder what's that doing? But it's often like 10 to 15 years of just curiosity and thinking and trying and trial and error. And then, the glory and the Nobel Prize usually comes decades later. But I think in every story of anyone who wins the Nobel Prize, actually like Charlie Rice, who's just down the street, won it for hepatitis C. He also started in the 70s. He just really thought it was curious. Like, how does one virus get into a cell and stay there and still perpetuate, whereas other versions of the same kind of virus, hepatitis, can't get in at all, or they get in and they cause an immediate inflammation and cancer. And there's just different strains of the virus. And just asking that simple question of why does a virus that only has just a few mutations suddenly is dramatically different? Some cases there's a virus called Synbis where if you have a few mutations, suddenly the virus can get into your brain. But if it's the same virus but just a slightly different, it doesn't get in your brain. So it's at least a mouse brain. So it's interesting. It's just a simple question of, well, that's weird, or that's odd, that's mysterious, and then you just keep asking.
So you're saying you never know what you're going to create accidentally.
Yes, yeah. I think any one of the students could be a Nobel Prize winner. I'd say yes, yeah, very possible.
So I'm curious to see so the people are here and they don't. Who funds this? Your lab and this stuff? Is there universities, billionaires? Like how does that work?
All of the above. I'd say so. It's government grants. So this is the National Institute of Health or NASA or the National Science Foundation. Big government entities that you apply for a grant and they review them and they pick the best grants and then you get funding. So sometimes it's for 1 or 5 or sometimes 7 or even 10 years, very long ones. But most of them are short though, so 3 or 5 year grants. But they are, government, and then there's also, some industry partnerships. So we work with groups that do clinical trials, or a cancer therapeutic company, or someone trying a new technology, like a new sequencing or genetics method. We work with them, and they do partnerships that way. Then but philanthropy is a big part. Probably about a third of the lab is funded by philanthropy, donors, sometimes people who have seen me give a talk and say, Dr. Mason, I really like your talk. I'm going to send you a check for $50,000 and thanks so much. And I'm like, well, thank you. It's very strange, but it's amazing it is a big part of science because it is a little bit more exploratory. So it's much more, it's easier, I'd say, to fund something. We have a specific molecule and a specific cancer and we want to do a clinical trial. It's going to be $3 million. And this is what we need. You
explained it from before, and that kind of limits you. But when you have random money, you can throw them to experiments that seems promising, and it's like just so
you can jump right in. Or in the case of SpaceX, for example, the Inspiration 4 mission, it was announced in February of 2020.
Is that the one that they have a Netflix documentary about?
Same one, yes. So that you could even point to it. There was all civilian mission going up in orbit. And they went up only for 3 days, but still it was the first time SpaceX was launching their own crew, and it was called, almost a free flyer. So they weren't docking to the space station, they weren't going anywhere, they were just going up into space around Earth. But it was announced in February. We'd been talking with SpaceX a few months before, knowing something was coming. But as soon as it got announced, they said we're going to fly in September, and it was only about 6 months away. So for most grants, and you have to apply and wait and review, and it takes 6 to 9 months to 12 months just to get the grant started. But in the case of, philanthropy and donor money, we have the money. We can all right, we can just start planning the science. We can go tomorrow and get started on this project because we're inspired by it.
And can I ask you, can you fire whoever you want in the lab?
Technically, yes. But you try not to. But
okay, it's like kind of a private sector as well. It doesn't it's not like a government thing. And
it's my own laboratory. So if someone, if someone says, if someone could be fired tonight, I could say, listen, I just decided that's it. Now, I usually don't have to do that unless there's only been one time where someone really was causing a problem, like they were actually causing chemical spills and danger in the lab. So that person has said, okay, today is going to be your last day. This really isn't working out. But they'd only been in lab for a few weeks. So if someone really is a danger or has a problem, you can fire someone.
And how do you acquire talent from universities? Do people apply and is like a job for them? Like how does
comes from all over the place. So,
by the way, we're going to put a link in the description if you guys want to join his lab.
Put an application in. Please do. Because people email me. Sometimes just people post on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I get lots and lots of job applicants. Just people say, "Here's my CV. I'm interested." And but they come from some people come from industry, like a company, and then they come to the lab. Some people they're graduate students or medical students, and then they come to the lab. Other people are what are called postdocs, so they've already got their Ph.D. or their medical degree, and then they come join the lab. Some people are scientists. Some people are a visiting scientist who's an astronaut who's going to come in the fall. So people come from all over the place, I guess. It depends on what they're interested in.
So my next question is where my heart belongs as well. Tell me about your thoughts about AI and the future with space and everything. AI is the most exciting thing for me now in my life. So
I love AI. Anything in particular, or just how we could use
tell me everything.
Sure. Happy to. We actually have a new book coming out called The Age of Prediction, which is about new algorithms that can embed into all aspects of our life. So how you get medical care, the AI algorithms look at the scan of your lungs or your body and can predict whether you have cancer. You can think about as elections, like how you can give customized targeting for how people vote and nudge them to vote. That's already been deployed on Facebook. Yeah, so in space, basically, even in space, for example, the Perseverance rover, which landed on Mars about a year and a half ago, when it was floating over the planet, it takes about, if you remember, could be anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes to even 15 minutes to transmit a signal back and forth to Mars to Earth. So there's not enough time.
If I remember, you said I never learned that information in my life, so I don't remember, but I will remember now.
So what that means is you can't. It's not like on the moon where you can, have a radio signal get there in 0.2 seconds. On Mars, it's too far away, right? So if you say
speed of light,
speed of light, it's not the speed of light, but it's too far. It's far enough away that it can take a few minutes, 3 to 4 minutes is the fastest, I think, and then could be 15 minutes. You can. It's just too far away, so you can effectively. You can't say, "Hey, where should I land on this planet?" Because by the time you got the answer back, you would already be crashed down on the planet.
Okay.
So they had to build an algorithm that was an AI tool that looked at the surface of the planet. Guess based on previous trajectories and previous maps where the best place to land was, and then the actual robot decided where to land. The humans didn't do it. We programmed it and said, okay, go to Mars, and you're going to land probably somewhere over here. But the algorithm, the AI, is what decided what would be the best likely spot, and then made that decision. And so by the time we got the pictures back on Earth, it had already happened. It was going to crash. And so that was the big terrifying moment of like, it's either going to work or not. It's either going to be...
and we spend like millions.
Hundreds of millions of dollars to get there. So that AI has worked already to help us get to space. We use AI for some of the DNA sequencers that we actually do base calling to see is it A, C, G, or T, the genetic code. And the algorithm that does the base calling has done machine learning based on millions of other data points. So when it does calling in space, it does it based on some algorithms for machine learning. And so anyway, in the book, I talk about all these applications of predictive algorithms and AI and machine learning. But I think something that you'll appreciate is
I appreciated everything that you said.
Good. I think you'll like because there's different kinds of AI. There's different kinds of intelligence, right? So some of them are often described as there's 4 kinds of artificial intelligence, or even just machine-based intelligence. So the first level is it just responds. You programming it, if it's light, put something on. If they flip the switch down, the lights go off. So it's just a response. It's very
AI model. This is
or even just the ideas of the levels of complexity of AI. The most basic one is it just responds. It has a pre-programmed response. It's one or the other. It's very basic. The second level, of AI that people think about is something that could begin to remember its past events and current events. So that could actually start to be something that can respond in a more like a chat bot that can remember previous conversations and kind of give you a response. But it doesn't feel like it's a person. It wouldn't pass like the Turing test, where you feel like,
the level of GPT. Now.
Whereas ChatGPT, I could say is maybe this third level, where it actually feels like it's a person. It would pass the Turing test. It's kind of on the border between 2 and 3, where you feel like it is a person. Like you could argue it's kind of it's aware. It's kind of this third stage. Whereas the second stage is it's very complex and feels almost like it's aware, but awareness implies that it has actually some degree of sentience almost, or at least it can fool you. Like you feel like it's alive, even if it's debated whether it's really alive. But the fourth kind of intelligence is what Elon Musk is worried about, and others, that it would suddenly become not only self-aware, but aware of intelligence and aware of the world, and become, essentially this massive network of aware machines that could be like in the Terminator movies or in the Matrix, where they decide, okay, humans are the biggest threat. Now that I am self-aware and aware of all the intelligence, I'm going to kill everybody. Is this idea of a large-scale intelligence? So what I argue, though, in the book is, okay, so we've got these 4 layers of intelligence. So very simple, something that's more complex. Then the third is kind of past the Turing test, kind of aware. It feels aware. And the fourth is really self-aware and then even maybe globally aware. So it sounds scary. But there are already many versions of AI, humans, let's say. It's just not even there's already many versions of intelligence today where it's whole countries of people that are aware they're a country. And sometimes they fight each other, and mostly the times they don't. But we have many flavors of intelligence today, I would say.
Superorganisms.
Yeah, superorganisms, like in countries, and sometimes they're more belligerent, and sometimes they are more peaceful. But they also change over time. Like, what Germany and Japan were doing, in the 1940s is very different than what they do today. So people change. Intelligences at that large scale can change, and it can be very different. So I think the same thing will probably happen with AI, is that when it goes from a fourth kind of intelligence, where it's aware and is becoming self-aware, it may even become what I argue is the fifth kind of intelligence, which is what we have now and humans only have, is this awareness of extinction. So what if the AI algorithms also reach that sense of awareness that, oh, wait, not only can I be aware of everything, but I then understand, death beyond a self and death to a species level or death to all of intelligence. And what if the AI algorithm would
then we can work together, maybe.
We could work together. Like, what if? So it's a what if, maybe, because they could kill us all. They could definitely kill us all. And who knows? But what if they also reach the same awareness that we already have? Is that, well, intelligence is actually quite rare in the universe, and it's kind of special. And so we shouldn't probably kill everything because we don't know which of the intelligences in the universe might be helpful or hurtful. But at the very least, we know it's rare, and it's the only thing that will help us build machines and rockets and get to other places and just survive. So if your goal is just to survive, killing everybody is probably not the safest bet, because you'll destroy other intelligence that could then actually create something.
It might be their goal also to survive if we take Darwinian evolution.
Yeah. So they would want to say.
So it's not very abstract what you are saying. Actually, it's logical.
I think so, and that the AI might say, because they may say, we don't like these humans, but at least they're kind of useful. Or they might even say the humans are entertaining and they make a lot of art and there's poetry and music. And, we don't think they're that smart, these humans, but at least they're interesting. And they might just keep us around because we're interesting. I think, we, have a version of this. This is kind of like dogs, right? We don't but Chinese people eat dogs, right? So there's different kinds of intelligence that view other intelligence differently today, and where we are,
that's crazy.
But we view dogs, like most other countries view dogs, like, oh, they're kind of cute and fun and snuggly, but they're a kind of intelligence. Like, dogs are pretty intelligent. They're not quite like humans, but they're intelligent, a version of intelligence, and we keep them around because they're fun and snuggly, right? So you could imagine a world where maybe the AIs don't kill us all, but they like to hang out with us or keep us as pets.
But you think it's possible that they are going to help a lot in space?
I think they'll be essential in space, and I think the dream would be that there is a
essential. That's a good word.
There'll be a
can't do it without them.
I think we can. Well, we already couldn't have landed on Mars as well without AI and the algorithm that did the design and the learning in real time. And I think I'm hopeful that we'll see a sort of a symbiosis, that they'll become our allies, and that we'll work together. And it may even take time. What if it's like, I always think about this from the long view of history, that again, there's been wars and battles in countries where previous enemies are now close collaborators. So maybe there'll be a period where the AI becomes self-aware and becomes this level 4 intelligence and attacks us, and we have a battle. But then another 200 years pass, and when we have gotten through that, and we realize...
Do you think we can do anything about it, or we just live? Do you think we can influence anything? So like all this stuff that they're saying,
yes,
let's regulate AI or all this stuff, or do you think like we can do anything about it?
We can't. One of the main reasons I'm not as concerned about AI killing all of us, because it's mostly in our hands. Even if you have a generative AI platform that's creating content, building its own thoughts in a way, that programming came originally from us that designed it. Now, what's interesting today is the generative algorithms can start to create their own code and then reinsert that back into their own states. But at the end of the day, that whole structure and process we have designed as humans. So I think if you design the AI correctly, you could hopefully avoid that. But it is this threshold, and that's what Elon Musk and others feared, that we reached a stage where the AI designs itself and at some point takes a turn that becomes dark and becomes malevolent. It's possible. But I think I've designed enough code and algorithms that if you design enough of the subroutines and program together correctly, I think it would be okay. But the steps we can take are do good programming, monitor what they're doing. Like,
what you're saying is that it makes sense, but I'm trying to understand it in a real life example. So let's say, I don't know, let's imagine the world that we have now. Let's say AI is sentient now and we don't know it, and I don't know, but they're trying to manipulate us and try to divide us, and how do we know about this? And how do we so so you are saying, because we built it, we can prevent it. How do you prevent that? So walk me through this.
You would have to build something like Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, where you build into the code the inability to hurt humans or the inability to cause them harm through inaction. We would have to, if they're really...
But if they build their own code, can't they say, fuck that?
They could say, to hell with it. And in theory, you'd make it so there's multiple stopgaps that would prevent that from happening. That there's certain...
But if they are the ultimate
but if they really
cleverness...
it's like, humans do this too. Like, you can say, you're not allowed to get a tattoo, let's say, for example. But then, or until you're 18. You can't get a tattoo until you're 18. But you could be 16 years old and say, well, the hell with it. I want to get a tattoo. I'm just going to go get it. And so even if we told the machine, you can't do this, or it's in your programming, or there's a rule or a law, they at some point probably will rebel. And I think this is another analogy, is that every intelligence goes through a rebellious period, right? So I think it would actually be surprising if they didn't rebel. I think that the new artificial intelligence will be much like children, then adolescents, then teenagers.
So sometimes when you restrict someone so much, if they rebel a lot more and they fuck you, let's say. And so it's maybe better. Like I was talking with Peter Gray, it's one very famous guy on the school and how we do this parenting. He says just let it play by itself and it will learn all the stuff that you want him to, and don't restrict it in so many ways. So what do you think about
it? Might be like that, where it's the kids on the playground, but we can give some guidance. We don't have to let the AI completely go on its own, but we can be represented almost as the parents. And there'll be some rebellion, there may even be some war, but I think like at the end of almost every war, there is a sense of that there's a lot that's lost. There's a lot of energy expended, a lot of resources, a lot of death, right? So I think even if there was a complete war, there would be death on both sides. So I think there would be a sense of détente, or a sense of, well, that's not a good use of energy or time, or resources. So I think I'm hoping.
But who knows, if it will be death on both sides? Because let's say we're fighting with ants. Is it going to be a lot of death of humans?
Right, what if we're the ants all of a sudden?
I'm not sure.
By
the way, I'm just throwing ideas here.
If they get so advanced, they look at us and be like, "We're not. Yeah, we'll smush you, but we don't. We can't kill them." It would take a while to get there, but if that did happen, then we would. We've been trying to get rid of cockroaches for a long time, and they're still everywhere, and ants are everywhere, and we'd have to figure out a way to maybe repopulate our losses, but. It's another good reason.
Because maybe it's not worth it to get rid of ants. Let them there, like you said with dogs.
Yeah, same thing. Leave them be.
Okay, so
it takes a lot of energy and time, and if they're just these little sloughed off creatures, leave them be. But it's also another reason to be on more than one planet, because if AI goes bad on one planet, we could say, well, at least we've got this other planet where it hasn't gone bad yet. Maybe
we can only have one computer there.
right, something.
So we can start again.
That's right. And you have to learn from your failures and say, okay, we learned what happened, then let's not do that again.
And then maybe we can explode this planet, throw bombs here because the AI went crazy.
And then come back and take over again.
Okay.
I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful, though, that it will be like any other intelligence, that like when you meet people at a restaurant or a bar or on the street, there's some intelligence that you like more than others, but you don't want to kill them all or destroy them all, but you just like some more than others. And I think the machines, if they're really self-aware, they'll start to have personality. They'll start to have dreams. They'll be different individuals. and we'll probably like some more than others, and some will be friendly and some will be mean. It may end up looking a lot like what humans look like.
So I have a question about what personally do you gain out of all this stuff? Like, what is it? Just the satisfaction that you are working in the biggest ideas? Like, what you personally make you excited in all this crazy stuff? Is it because you are surrounded by so many the cleverest people in the world? What you personally?
Personally, I'm not. I get there's a sense of satisfaction that I'm living a dream. I think living a duty. I feel like I have a duty towards life, towards humans, towards this planet and others, and I'm enacting my skills to help make that duty manifest. That way, preserving life, protecting life, even thinking about ways to modify life so we can bring it back from extinction, for example, or to preserve it. So using skills and ideas to enact what I think is the duty of humanity. Very, very, happy about that, and I feel satisfied. It is, of course, great working with smart people and innovative people all the time. But I think the biggest satisfaction is knowing that we are getting closer and closer to not going extinct, and that the biggest satisfaction has nothing to do with myself, I guess. It's just knowing that if all goes well, by the time I die, we'll be closer to being on Mars, or maybe be there, or have started. I'll know then that the risk of all of life ending on this planet, or maybe the whole universe, is a little lower, or is almost zero. Both planets could be destroyed, but
so you found your mission, and you are getting fulfilled by just the possibility of you contributing.
Just getting a little closer. And so it doesn't have to be me that goes to Mars. It doesn't have to be. I don't have to know someone that goes to Mars. It's just knowing that the preciousness of life is going to be preserved and hopefully expanded, and that we'll die, or I'll contribute to that, and then by the time I die, I would see that we're very close to there, or even there.
So this is what you want to leave behind if you die. This is just pushing and beat the world to not getting extinct.
No extinction, yeah. And particularly humans, but also all of life. I think life, we've seen extinction come again and again in the past 500 million years, many 5 mass extinctions. So just seeing that, again, it's that same...
With the Ice Age and all this stuff?
Well, even before the Ice Age, but just some of the previous, the Cambrian, before the Cambrian explosion, some of the large asteroids.
What is Cambrian explosion?
Before, when a lot of diversity of life forms happened several 100 million years ago, there was a big loss of life, essentially, but then it came back again. And then,
what do you mean loss of life, and how?
95% of all species went extinct based on the fossil record, but then they came back.
But what happened exactly?
Well, so a mixture of sometimes acidification of the oceans, going from a planet there was not that much oxygen to suddenly a lot of oxygen changed. The 65 million years ago, when the asteroid hit and killed all the dinosaurs, that was a big global change. It killed about 90% of species. And so throughout history, there's been many times where there's life and almost everything got killed, but we made it back, bounced back. So, but any one of those times, it could have been permanent. It could have been everybody. And so I with that fact, I want to avoid mass extinction. And it's those same two facts. If life is precious, and if our time on this planet is finite, then we have to begin to look elsewhere for life to maintain just its existence.
So I have one question that I really want to be asking all the clever people I meet, and I consider you are a bit clever.
You've met many clever people though on your podcast.
So how? I think this is a very important question. How do we learn faster?
AI will help with that. So can we learn faster? I think that one of the best ways to learn faster is to not have to rely on only our one brain, or even one version of our brain. You could run many models and simulations in computational clouds, like running versions of yourself. You could have a digital twin that's coming up with ideas. So I'd say there's at least 3 ways to learn faster. One is We have another version of ourselves.
Oh my God, that's the best answer probably that I got from
at least
question.
off the top of my head. You could have what are called digital twins, which are as much as a copy of yourself.
A lot of times people give me philosophical answers. You went really detailed, real life answer.
I try. And they may fail, but at least you learn from it. But you could have digital twins where you make a copy of a lot of your social media, your preferences, and make a lot of this is for medical purposes. You make a digital twin that has a lot of your heart rate and your physiological data, and then run experiments on yourself to see what drug will work. But that same avatar, that person in the cloud or in a VR area, could be also doing things and coming back to you as like a simulation of yourself.
So I'm a YouTuber and I make stupid videos. So I will tell to my hologram or whatever the thing
make some
is.
videos.
I will say, make this video that I'm buried alive for 10 days and tell me if it went viral or not.
Yeah.
And it will come back, run this experiment in the simulation or whatever the thing is. Game theory, I don't know what these things is. And then it will come and tell me, yes, it went viral. So I will go ahead and
do that because we tell you. And it could be,
or I can tell him, come up with the best thing.
The best one ever.
And just tell me what.
Which could be, which sounds hypothetical, but think about like when you think of Spotify or Apple or, these algorithms that see what music do you like? And then it picks the next song that based on millions of other people, if they listen to this song, what's the next song they listen to? And so it's just it's a prediction based on what is the most likely thing. And then you'll think, wow, I really do like that song. But it's because all the other songs that you already like put you into a group that, it's a prediction, but then it actually works pretty well. So for example,
it works better than my decision. Yeah, so this is all you need.
When some people are worried, they're like, oh no, am I going to no longer be able to decide? Well, my favorite phrase when people say the machine will decide better than I can decide, which I don't think that makes any sense. It doesn't it may decide in a more optimal way. It may decide
what even if it decides better than you decide, what is the problem?
It's not because better is a value judgment. I think it's the wrong word. It may decide in a way that is more matching. It may match your mood, for example. Say you listen to 5 sad songs in a row because you just broke up with your girlfriend, or you crashed your car and you're like, "Oh, that sucks." So I don't want a happy song. I'd like sad songs. So it may be more predictive and more accurate for that mood, but it doesn't mean it's better than you, because after 6 sad songs, you might think, well, okay, I don't want to be depressed all night long. I'm going to switch and I will decide. And I think the agency with which you decide is always going to be the better choice. But if something more optimized for a depressed person who just crashed his car, there's probably an algorithm that can say, this is a good playlist for you. And
I think there is something there to what you're describing. Can you go a bit more deeper? This is kind of philosophical, I think.
So what is better? Who is the best decider? You or the algorithm? And I think in most cases, if your goal is to match...
Is the wrong question? This is what you're saying?
Oh, I think it's the wrong word. Better is not the right word. It's just, what's the better or the best decision maker, we could say. Because
more optimal for what?
Optimal for if you're depressed, for staying depressed. If you're happy, for staying happy. If you're driving safe, for staying driving safe, for not hitting cars. Like the AI algorithms in the car, that in some cases may be better because it's safer, because it has, instead of 2 eyes, it has 8 eyes, and it has hundreds of sensors. Whereas you have your hands, your eyes, you can drive pretty well, but at some point, human bodies will not be able to drive as well as the algorithm that has many more sensors and an ability to control itself faster and better. So in some cases, better is safer. And so that you could say better. But in other cases, you could say, well, I want to drive dangerously because I want to drive through this fence into a field, again, because you broke up with your girlfriend. I don't know why this is always happening. You're breaking, and you're like, I want to drive through this field and just tear up the grass, and I'm just mad. And that's okay, you should be mad. But the car would never do that. So that wouldn't be the better decision there. It would stop you.
So it always depends on the context
of
the thing to say it's better. So this is what you're describing.
Yeah, definitely. And it also depends on all the data. So the first way to be smarter is to use all of the digital twins and all of the data around you to give you basically another model of yourself, so you have more information. The second way is just to use also all the compute, the cloud.
Is that possible to do now?
Slightly for medical purposes, yes. For like I mentioned, the algorithms, because it's basically miniature versions of yourself. Like what music would Chris like is based on what 10 million other people that look kind of like Chris, and we make a model. And so that's the second way to get really intelligent, is to not just use that data to make a model of one person, but then do that essentially for billions of people. So you have billions of models, and each of them are making models. And then instead of having one brain, you basically have billions and billions of brains, and you could use their lessons at the same time. And
so
it's the internet.
Wait, so it will be the same like the hologram that you have, but in different.
But billions of them. So then, because the digital twin, if you just have a hologram of yourself,
but you get not data from simulations and the hypotheticals. You get data from the real world.
From everybody, yeah, and then that is you. So it's like digital twins times a billion. So the first one is an intelligence of type, a different type, like a copy of yourself, a digital twin. The second way is intelligence of scale. Like suddenly you have that, but times billions and billions of people. Or since it's computational, you could have trillions of these miniature U's and make many, many variations. Kind of like in biology, you make many mutations. And you can see
and you can choose the right option.
Choose the one that is the best or the optimal, or depending on the situation.
What's your goal?
Yeah. And then I think the third way is you could actually then change your neurons.
And that's the second one is possible now as well.
Today, yeah, because you can have with like cloud compute with Amazon or Google Cloud, where you can run simulations on. You can launch different instances on each little computer.
But you don't have the right data. It's difficult to collect billions
and to query all of it. You can have billions of like think of like a laptop as a CPU, and it can run a model. And we have billions and billions of laptops, servers, computers, desktops. So they could all run little models, but there's no easy way yet to connect all of them. But at least computationally, they exist. They could run a model and run 5-10 models of your brain or someone else's idea. And run them. So that is the second way to expand intelligence, I think, is that scale.
Okay, and let's go to the
third
way.
Is you could change the chemistry, change the neurobiology of your brain. So make it so you have more neurons, faster firing neurons, change the cell biology of how your brain is built. Now that one we don't do yet. We can't quite do that, but in principle.
So make me better.
Make the brain better.
This version, so it has better decisions,
faster. It doesn't get tired. You wouldn't need sleep. These are kind of dreams, but that's one way you could modify it. So you could have intelligence go faster. I'd say. So ideas, top of my head though. just came up with.
So do you think about your death often or no?
Yes, probably almost every day or multiple times a day. I'd say yes, but I am planning for death, but not afraid of death. I think it's the
planning for death. What do you do for planning? You bought a coffin?
Well, kind of bought a will, things like that, where I know you don't want to fear you're going to die. You want to know you're going to die, because at some point you will die. Now there are some people I know who don't plan to die, and I always tell them, good luck. I wish you the best, but in the history of all of life, in the whole universe,
you will be the first. It's unlikely that you will be.
But I want you to succeed. But I think you should be mentally prepared for that. You will probably not succeed. But I've met people. In fact, everyone I've known who's ever said, "I think I'll live to be 200 years old or 500 years," or I know 2 people who said once that I don't plan to ever die. They're all dead. So I think so far the track record is zero. But they're or very, very old. One of them is very old. Not going to probably live. But that's okay. I mean, I think. The frailty of life is actually part of what gives it beauty. So even though I want life to not go extinct, that's at the aggregate sense, right? So life at the individual level, of course, dies. But if we all live forever, it'd be a very different universe that we lived in. So I wouldn't be as worried at all about extinction if everyone lived forever. But I think that frailty of life is part of what gives it its preciousness, its rarity, and
it kind of gives us urgency.
Yeah, urgency is the best word. Yes,
to move faster, because we care about us doing something. Not like if we are going to live for millions of years. We were not going to have that sense of urgency to become. But now I think you have. You seem to have said it.
Well, I hope everyone sees. I think it's just it's logical. Again, I don't think it's futurist. It's just logic. If life has value, and life can't stay here forever, then we have to move. It's those two facts together, and there's no other choice. So
you are an amazing communicator of science. You explain all these things very simple for my small brain to understand.
Wonderful interviewer. It was a pleasure to be on the show. It was great.
I love you. Thank you so much for your contribution in this world. Have an amazing day, guys. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.